Personally, I loved the red flag game. It's one of my favorite games so far in terms of what we get to do because you can have the perfect person. The person like they love you, they cherish you, they're a pro gamer. And for some odd reason, there's always a red flag in the midst, right? And some of us, we experience whether it be our friends, maybe someone we're interested in, but there's something about the person, it seems so great, but then you experience a red flag. And the problem is, for some of us, red's our favorite color, so we run towards the red flag, and we want that even more and more. But we experience this, again, in our relationships, whether it be friends, our family, significant others, spouses. We have these flags, or we have these things that kind of makes us feel like, what is going on? What is something wrong about it? And a lot of times we kind of want to stuff it down. We don't even want to talk about it. Is that maybe if I ignore it, then it would just go away. That's actually how my mom personally treated certain situations, especially when it came to relationships. My mom, awesome woman, amazing mother, but she did not like talking about anything that made her feel uncomfortable. And one of the conversations that made her feel very uncomfortable was the conversation of the birds and the bees. And I don't know if you have a plan to talk about your children about that. My mom didn't have a plan at all because when it was my prom night, I was going to go and pick up my date. And as I was going to go and I left the house, my mom grabbed my arm and she was like, Anthony. And I can tell the air was tense. You could like cut it like a knife, right? It was so intense. My mom grabbed me. She turned me around and she looked at me dead in the eye. And she said, Anthony, you know? And I looked her dead in the eye and I said, I know. And then I walked out the door. And that was basically our conversation of the birds and the bees. Because it's so much easier to try to ignore it. Or it's so much easier to just stuff it down and we hope that it goes away. Because a lot of times when we are interacting with someone, again, a spouse, friend, significant other, we find these flags that make us feel a little uncomfortable. It kind of causes this tension within the relationship. And we are hoping that as long as I ignore it, maybe it will go away. Maybe if we just touch upon it just a little bit and a little bit, maybe he or she will fix it. But of course, we know that relationships aren't perfect. And sometimes relationships break. And then we tell ourselves, you know what? Next time I have a friend, I'm not going to have these types of traits. You know, the next time I date someone, he or she is not going to be like this. I'm going to make sure he or she is like this and have all these different traits and everything. And then we hope that the next person we meet, the next friend we make, the next relationship, girlfriend, boyfriend, or whatever, we feel that that's going to be the person that's going to be better. And we feel that the only way to fix problems in our relationships is just to stuff it down, ignore it, or maybe just push them aside and then hope for something better. Because we're on this series called Healthy Relationships. And as we talk about healthy relationships, one of the things that I want to ask us today is this question right up here. And the question is, what sets my relationship up for success? What sets my relationship up for success? And we're going to look at this story, and we're actually going to start in the story of King Xerxes, this Persian king. And Xerxes, he was a very powerful king in a very powerful empire at the time. He begins to call for his queen. And he says, he was having this grand party, and he asked one of his servants to, hey, call Queen Vashti. Oh, no, you don't have to, you can go back. Yes, thank you. Call Queen Vashti. And as you call her, tell her to come because I want to show her off to all my friends in the party. Because Vashti, what was the translation means is beautiful, right? You have to be really beautiful to have the name beautiful. I'm just saying, right? And Xerxes calls Vashti and says, come, I want to show you off to all my friends. But Vashti hears the servant of King Xerxes, and Queen Vashti says, you know what? I'm not going to go. I don't want to go. I don't feel like it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe she was busy. Maybe she had something really, really important to do. I don't know. But she ended up telling the king's servant, you know what? I'm not going to go. So the servant goes back to King Xerxes, and you could just imagine the stress of the servant. He's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And he goes to the king and he says, King, she said that she's not going to come to you. And Xerxes, and this is in front of all his friends, all of his attendants, the most powerful man in the land, and his own wife says, I'm not going to come. The brother was embarrassed. The brother was in shock. He was hurt. He was in pain. It's like, how could the person I call my wife not come when I ask? Not only that, in front of my friends, in front of the people, you know what? She's not my wife anymore. And so what ends up doing is that Xerxes ends up saying, you know what? Queen Vashti is no longer going to be the queen of the land. You know what? I'm going to find someone else to replace her. So what he does is he calls this royal decree, and he calls for all throughout the land. He's like, bring all the virgins. And you know what? From all the virgins who come, I'm going to pick a new queen. And so the servants heard him. They're like, okay, let's not make him mad. Let's not piss him off more, because if he did this to the queen, if we don't listen, we're going to get in trouble. So they go out throughout the land and they find all the virgins and they compile them together so that they can be the new queen. And one of these people that was chosen was this young girl named Esther. And Esther, she didn't have a mom or dad. She lived with an uncle who was a person that was part of the family that decided to take care of her. It was his responsibility to take care of her. But even then, she was snatched away from her uncle's home to be one of the contestants in this crazy dating game that King Xerxes was making. And as King Xerxes walking through the land, saw all the young ladies, he makes his eye on Esther. And he sees her, and he was very pleased. So he decided, you know what? You're going to be my queen. Without even asking, without even knowing her opinion of do you want to live in the palace? Do you want to be a queen? Nope, didn't matter. He says, you know what? You're going to be my new queen. Just like that. And Esther was taken from her home, taken from her family, and now thrown into this new lifestyle that she did not only not sign up for, but was forced to partake. And we see that King Xerxes, he was hurt. He was hurt by his queen, Queen Vashti. And because of that, because he was hurt, he was like, you know what? Forget about her. And I'm going to get someone new. Because isn't that a principle that we experience in our lives? There's a thing that we say in counseling that we say, hurt people hurt people. And oftentimes we don't realize that when we are hurt, we react in a way that we just end up hurting someone else. Maybe intentionally, maybe unintentionally. But we see this principle that hurt people hurt people. And we see that Esther was one person that was impacted through that. Because no one asked her if she wanted to be queen. Xerxes just took her from her family, from the life that she knew. And this is going to be it. And a lot of times we feel that we're not going to respond that way. Is, you know what? If I'm hurt, if something happened to me, you know what? I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen to other people. How many times have we told ourselves that, you know what? I am never going to be like them. I am never going to be like my mom. I'm not going to be like my dad. I'm not going to be like this type of person who hurt me so much. But it's funny because the more we realize and the more we try to resist, we find out we end up becoming just like them. The more we find that we resist, another counseling thing we say is whatever we resist continues to persist in our life. And we see that in the example of Xerxes as well, is that he was hurt. And because that he was hurt, he was like, you know what? I don't even care. I'm just going to make sure this queen is gone, and I'm going to bring a new queen, regardless. If anything, it's a step up for this new person. Because it didn't matter to him. He just wanted to fix the pain that he felt. And for Esther, she was the recipient of this pain, of a hurt person now hurting someone else. It didn't matter if he was a king. It didn't matter if he was a man of power. People still feel hurt. And in turn, we react, we respond a certain way. And we read in continuing in the story of this man, Esther's uncle, Mordecai, who was the one taking care of Esther. And he began to seem very down. Because Esther would send her servants to check up on her family, to make sure everyone's okay. And she noticed that her uncle, who took care of her, began to look really down. So she sends her servant to ask, can you find out what's wrong with him? Why is he so down? What has him so downhearted that he's acting and feeling this way? So the servant goes and finds Mordecai on the wall, and he asks, Mordecai, the queen is asking, why do you look so down? Why do you look so hurt? And then Mordecai tells Queen Esther's servant, and he tells her that there is now a decree. A decree was made and sent throughout the entire land, throughout the entire empire, so that all Jews would be killed. A decree was made that when all the Jews would be killed, there would be this man who would pay the royal treasury to make sure that all the Jews were killed. And Mordecai was just distraught. He was so downhearted, and he didn't know what to do. Again, when we are hurt, how tempting is it to be reactive? When we feel hurt, how tempting is it just to respond or react in a certain way that just makes us feel justified, that makes us feel a certain way that gets our point across? Because for some of us, that's exactly how we communicate. For some of us, that's exactly what we've been doing in our relationships. But you see, we have a choice that we get to make. In whatever relationship we're in, we have a choice of what will come through from it. And we read this, and we see this in Esther chapter 4. And we have the verse up here in the projector, or on the screen, and it says this. And this is where the story starts, where I want to read, is I want to read after Mordecai tells Esther what happened. And this is Esther, and then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, she instructed her servant to say to her uncle, is that, listen, I hear that I hear that all the people are going to die But you want me to go where? You want me to go to the king and talk to him? Listen, if I go to the king and he didn't call me, people die. Doesn't matter if I'm queen or not, even I will die if I am not called by the king first. Mordecai, don't you see the other queen who disobeyed the king? He kicked her out real quick. What do you think he's going to do to me? And Queen Esther replies this to Mordecai in verse 10 and 11 says, or in verse 11, and it says this, and all the king's officials and all the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death, unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. And when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think, Esther, that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. When we read about how Esther and Mordecai were communicating, this has been going over time. It's not like just they're having this face-to-face conversation. This has been going, and it has been done through a servant because they can't meet face-to-face. And what's happening is you can imagine the tension that is building. Have you ever been left on red? If you have what's that called? An Apple phone. You guys know what I'm talking about. Samsung people, I don't know what you guys have. All I know is Samsung is green bubbles. But for the iPhone users, you know what I'm talking about because you see the blue bubble share that has been delivered. And then it even says in the text group, it says read. And you know if someone read your message or not. Actually, I'm curious. Does Samsung do that too? Can you see that in anyone has a Samsung phone? Not in text messages. I'm not endorsing Apple, but I'm just saying, right? No. But we've been left on red, and you know how aggravating it is. How frustrating it is, or if anything, how anxious it is. You know, when Susan and I first started dating, she after our first date, it was not that great, and I texted her. I'd be like, "Hey, it was so nice to have a date with you, though it wasn't. It was horrible, and I would like to meet with you again." And do you know what she did? She left me on red. She left me on red for about 6 to 8 hours. And I know this girl saw my text. It says it right there. It says read. And you know, when that happens, you know how many thoughts go inside your head? Like, I know it was such a bad date. Oh my gosh, what did I do? And how embarrassing, and all these emotions I felt when she left me on red, and then the anxiety of like, oh my goodness, I guess this failed. On to the next, right? But I was like, oh my goodness, what do I do? And you can imagine Esther and Mordecai as well. The anxiety being built between them of you gotta say something. Uncle, I can't. If I do, I'll die. Esther, you have to say something. If you don't, people will perish. If you don't, people will die. And guess what? If you don't, you may be safe at the moment, but God is going to raise. God is going to save us. What is it that we choose to do in our relationships? Because we see, when we read here, We read that both parties, Mordecai and Esther, one of the biggest things that they wanted to just say was, hear me. One of the big things, what they wanted each of the other person to do was hear me. Hear my pain. Hear what I'm going through. But you see, a lot of times when we talk to people, when we talk to others, we're not in the position to hear. We're more in the position to say. We're more in the position to respond. We're more in the position to get our thought across. And when someone speaks to us, especially when emotions are high, we're already thinking of the next thing to say rather than just listening for listening's sake. And we see that both of them wanted to be heard. Esther was saying, if I go, I may die. And Mordecai was saying, if you don't go, God will use someone else. But you have an opportunity to change lives now. And we find that interesting because we feel that we want to be in that position to change lives. We want to be in the position that can like make a positive change in someone's life. But we're just waiting for that chance. And we forget that every single day we have an opportunity to change someone's life. And we change it through relationships. We change it through interactions with people, whether it be our friends, family, significant others. We have this opportunity to change someone's life. But the thing is, we see these relationships more for ourselves. What feeds me? What makes me feel better? Let me get my fix first, and then I'll do something. But when we do that, we kind of find ourselves into relationships that we even asking ourselves, why am I in this? Why do I keep dating the same person over and over again? How come I can't find a decent guy, a decent girl? Why do I keep dating these losers? Please, I hope you don't think about your significant other or spouse like that now. But maybe you've thought about that. Why do I keep going back to these unhealthy relationships, these unhealthy friends, these unhealthy significant people that are coming into my life? Why do I keep going back to that? And a lot of times we keep going back to that. A lot of times we keep going back to unhealthy relationships because we know how to thrive in those unhealthy relationships. I know it sounds kind of sadistic in a way. It's like, well, Anthony, why are you telling me that I want to stay in an unhealthy relationship? Well, it's because we're so used to being in unhealthy relationships that I would rather stay in an unhealthy relationship and thrive than be in a healthy relationship and learn to progress in it. Because for some of us, we were taught or we learned from our friends or significant others that if I yell, if I scream, if I manipulate you in a way, I can get what I want. If I change or if I do something that's even though I know it's unhealthy, I can still survive. I even thrive in it because I know how to manipulate the situation in this unhealth. And I would rather stay here in this relationship than go into a healthy relationship where we can actually talk, we can actually share, and where we can actually be vulnerable. Because we often find that our relationships takes a lot of courage to go through. You see, Esther had to make a decision. She had to make a decision of just fighting back. Am I just going to continue to tell Mordecai, no, you're not listening to me. I'm going to die if I don't do this, or if I do this. Like, Mordecai, like, uncle, listen to me. And it takes a lot of courage to break a cycle that's been done to us. That's been done to Esther. Uncle, I was never asked to be here. I never wanted to be queen. I wanted to be home with you, with my family, with my cousins, with all of us together, eating bread on the table. I never asked to be the queen. Why are you telling me to do this? I'm just a victim. And Mordecai tells us, Esther, maybe you're not a victim. Maybe you were placed here because God saw that you can make a change. And you see, church, this is exactly where we want to begin to become aware of, is that every position that we are in, maybe God has placed you here to make a change that you did not know. Maybe every relationship that you begin to have was a relationship divinely appointed by God so that you can share this amazing love that doesn't come from us, but comes from Him. Because if it comes from us, we just want our way. We just want our method, our agenda to be done. But God may have set these relationships between us so that people can experience Him. You see, Esther was a person who was a recipient of a hurt person hurting people. She was a recipient of a person who was hurt, and therefore, as a response, he just grabbed anyone that he saw fit, and now she's in this position. Esther alone. Esther afraid. Esther feeling, I don't know what I can do in this point of death. What do I do? She now gets to decide, am I going to be a person who hurts people because I'm hurt? Or am I going to begin to break that cycle that was even given to me? Because Esther then replies, after Mordecai and her begin to have this conversation, she then says, Mordecai, then, you know what? I want you to tell everyone in the land to fast and begin praying. Because you know what? I'm going to go and talk to the king. I'm going to go and share what needs to be shared. And she shares and says to Mordecai, says, if I perish, I perish. I perish. That word, and I know it sounds so quick, so fast, but that word and what she's saying to Mordecai is so powerful, is Mordecai, I'm afraid. Mordecai, I don't know if I'm good enough to even do this. Mordecai, I don't even see progress that could come to this. But if I perish, I perish. And she begins to point, not fingers to anyone else. She does not begin to point, this is Xerxes' fault. This is your fault. This is Vashti's fault. It's everyone's fault. It's not about me. But rather than pointing the finger at anyone else, what she does is she begins to take responsibility for who she is. And it's actually in that she breaks the cycle. It's actually in that when she begins to not think about you, but more of I. She breaks the cycle of hurt that's been going on in the land. You and I are in a position to break many cycles of pain that was brought onto us. Maybe the pain was intentional that was put onto you, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for that. Words, nothing is justifiable in that. For some of us may have this pain that's been unintentional. They didn't mean to hurt us. But because of just sin in this world, because of imperfection, it happens. And it was unintentional, but it's been done to us. But you and I, we have this grace given by God to break this cycle of pain that's been given to us in our relationships. And we get to do that through the power of Christ. You see, I asked this question, is that what sets my relationship up for success? What sets up success? Because this is important to know, is that we're not saying that this is the answer. We're not saying that this is going to be the end all be all, but this is going to be the beginning to set our relationships up for success, whether it be friendships, significant others, spouses, whatever it may be. This is what's going to set it up. And what sets my relationship up for success is this, is that by not reacting with what I want to say, but describing how I feel. The way that we set ourselves up for relational success is not reacting with what I want to say, but we're finally taking the courage to describe how I feel. Because it's very, very common for us to be reactive. You hurt me. You did this to me. You're being mean. You're yelling. You have this tone. Yada, yada, yada. It's so easy to point fingers and be reactive. And maybe in our relationships, that's what we're used to. Where our parents have been reactive to us. Our friends have been reactive to us. Our siblings have been reactive to us. And in turn, we have now been reactive to others. And we just say whatever we want to say. But we know that these words that we carry, the words that we have, are very powerful. That it can either build us up, build others up, or it can tear others down. One of the most courageous steps that what we can do is stop reacting with what we want to say. But we finally take the courage to now describe how we actually feel. One of the things we do, Susan and I do, is we fight. I know we're not a perfect couple, y'all. I know you thought that in being a pastor, we're power, like we never fight. Nah, we fight a lot. But it's okay. It's okay. Because when we fight, this is an opportunity for us to share. One of the big things that we do in our conversations is not pointing fingers. One of the things I do for marriage counseling and premarital counseling is I teach couples how to fight fair. Right? Fighting isn't bad, but we want to fight fair. Like you don't want to go and just like go for someone's jugular. That's cheating, right? Like you can't do that. You're not playing basketball and use baseball rules. Same thing with couples that when we fight and when we argue is we want to fight fair. And one of the rules I give couples in order to fight fair is to always use, or not always, but to use I statements or I feel statements. And it's hard because we're not taught to do this. We're not taught to use feeling words. And what we're taught is maybe this cycle of hurting and passing that on. But one of the ways that we can break this cycle is we start using feeling words. And by saying that is like when we're angry or when we're upset or we're about to fight with our spouse, significant other, or friend, we have this opportunity to not point fingers and blame and be the victim, but what we have the opportunity to do is share this vulnerability within inside of us. that I feel a certain way. One of the things that Susan shared with me, and I appreciate her so much for sharing this, is when we were still dating, she shared this. And we're talking, and this is a time that we're just busy. We're still like in the phase of launching and planting the church and trying to find all these different things. And she says, Anthony, I don't feel appreciated. And of course, for me, I want to react, and I want to say, is like, what do you mean you don't feel appreciated? I bought you McDonald's on the way. I thought of you. I gave you an extra hash brown. Of course I'm thinking of you. That's my love language, just buy food. But if I said that, that wouldn't solve anything. If anything, it would probably hurt her more. And Susan began to share, and she was being so delicate in this, and I appreciate her, is that she's like, Anthony, I don't feel appreciated because I feel the time that you give me is leftover time. That you give time to others, you give time to do this, you give time for church, but then I get the leftover time. And I don't feel appreciated, I don't feel loved. And when she said that to me, I began to be very defensive. As a good husband or a good boyfriend at the time should be, right? I'm defensive. But it was really by grace, by her patience with me, that I got to see that my actions were causing pain not only to her, but it was pain to both of us. And so what we did is we began to share how we feel. Is after she shared, I feel unappreciated, I begin to tell her, I feel overwhelmed. I've been feeling this. I feel like I'm drowning. And that was one of the best times that she and I got to share how, not only how we're both feeling, but now how we both can meet each other. Because of that conversation, like Susan and I, what we did was we decided to have a brunch time that she and I will always keep. It's like her and my time. And I love brunch. I don't know, that's my favorite meal, brunch. If I can eat brunch anytime, that'll be it. And now, that time was made because I got to feel what she was feeling. And because of that, we broke the cycle of underappreciating. We broke the cycle of being reactive. We broke the cycle of saying that, no, I'm too busy for you. And you see, church, we have this opportunity as well to break the cycle. And the way we break this cycle, the way we set our relationships up for success, and the way we get to do this is we begin by being vulnerable and sharing, I feel. So I encourage you this week, maybe it be with your spouse, your significant other, your friend, your siblings, whomever, but I wonder what it'll look like when you begin to share how you feel. And Google is a very powerful tool. If you don't know feeling words, it's fine. Just type feeling words in Google and you'll see all the feeling words. And you then get to see, oh, this is how I can articulate how I feel. Because it is in that powerful changes happen within our relationships. So whether you're feeling upset, whether you're feeling tired, or you're feeling like you're overwhelmed, I want to encourage you this week to just share with someone, your friend, someone in your life, feeling what you are feeling. Don't feel like you have to go through life alone. Don't feel like you have to be here by yourself. No, you have a church. You have brothers and sisters. You have people who want to be with you. Don't live life alone. And the way we begin that, the way we transform that is we begin by just sharing how I feel. Would you join me in prayer? Father, I just want to say thank you for giving us an image of what it looks like to break cycles of pain within our own lives. That, Lord, that I've been hurt because someone hurt me. And I feel that this is how I need to act, or this is what I need to do. But Lord, we pray for the courage to take that step to break the cycle that has been done to me. That I stop chasing relationship after relationship, that maybe I'll find a person who's perfect, or I find a person who's already fixed. But Lord, rather than trying to find that, Lord, may we be the person who begins to pursue relational health in all of them. Because we know that we have the opportunity, that God, that you have designed us to be a vessel to go out in whatever relationship we have, whether it be the barista, the gas station attendant, our significant other. God, these people in our lives are going to be impacted because we chose to love the way you have loved us. And may we begin to act this way by sharing how I feel. And Lord, it is in that moment that we begin to feel, that we begin to see how great you are. So Father, may we take the courage to share. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.